sometimes the truth doesn't explode. Sometimes it just sits there, buried so deep that everyone assumes it was never real to begin with. Years pass, documents get sealed, recordings go missing, names vanish behind thick black lines, and the people who know the most convince themselves that silence is safer than memory. But every once in a while, someone cracks. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let the light in. And when that happens, everything people thought they understood starts to feel wrong. This time, the silence cracked around Ghislaine Maxwell, and what leaked out wasn't just uncomfortable, it was devastating. For months, whispers had been circulating quietly in legal corridors, not on social media, not on television, but in the places where people lower their voices and stop writing things down. And Maxwell, they said, had spoken. Not in public, not to cameras, but in those sealed interviews the public was never meant to hear in full. And buried inside those erased hours was a name no one expected to surface in the Epstein records. Not a senator, not a billionaire, not a hedge fund titan, Meghan Markle. According to sources who claim familiarity with the redacted testimony, Maxwell didn't casually mention her. She didn't speculate. She didn't guess. She allegedly described a connection that, if true, completely reshapes everything people think they know about Meghan's rise, her carefully polished image, and the path that led her straight into the heart of the royal family. This wasn't the story the world was sold. This was the version that was never supposed to survive the editing room. When the Epstein files were finally released, the public braced for impact. People expected revelations, names, accountability. Instead, they got pages that looked like Swiss cheese, black bars, missing pages, audio tapes that jumped abruptly as if entire conversations had simply been erased. Officials insisted nothing meaningful had been removed, but those who work close to the process say that claim doesn't hold up, because according to legal insiders, more than 12 full hours of Maxwell's interviews were pulled before public release. Not minutes, not fragments. 12 hours where names, locations, events, and personal descriptions were wiped clean. And somewhere inside those missing hours, Meghan Markle's name allegedly appears. Maxwell herself reportedly hinted at this omission. Not the parts everyone heard, not the pieces journalists analyzed, but the erased sections, the ones that never made it out. People close to the review process say those sections included detailed descriptions of young women who moved through Epstein's world, how they were introduced, who facilitated their access, and what role they played inside elite social environments designed to flatter, entertain, and privately serve powerful men. Then came the detail that reportedly stunned even hardened investigators. In those redacted portions, Maxwell allegedly described a young woman known by a quiet nickname, Flower. A name, she supposedly explained, used for someone who appeared gentle, charming, harmless on the surface, but who moved through rooms most people never even knew existed. According to these claims, Maxwell identified Meghan as that person, an Epstein girl, someone allegedly connected to adult entertainment settings linked to elite gatherings. Not a dramatic accusation, not shouted, just stated, flatly, devastatingly. Meghan worked. They called her Flower. If that allegation is true, it places Meghan not on the edges of Epstein's world, but inside the same carefully managed social pipeline that connected young women to wealthy men years before she ever met Prince Harry. And that's where the story turns darker, because Maxwell wasn't the only person who allegedly connected Meghan to that world. Virginia Roberts, before Prince Andrew settled his lawsuit, had a witness list. Survivors, observers, people who had seen things they weren't supposed to see. According to legal insiders, Meghan Markle was on that list. Virginia allegedly believed Meghan had knowledge of Andrew's private behavior, not through rumors, through proximity, through presence, from the period when Andrew, Epstein, and Maxwell operated closely. That request, sources say, sent shockwaves straight into palace walls, because putting Meghan on the stand would have meant placing the future Duchess under oath, answering questions about where she had been, who she knew, how she entered those circles. And according to people familiar with those discussions, that wasn't a risk anyone was willing to take, because questioning Meghan wouldn't just have exposed what she might have known about Andrew, it would have exposed how she got there in the first place. Not long after Andrew settled, quietly. No trial, no testimony, no witnesses, and while Andrew exited through a settlement, Meghan moved deeper into royal life. But stories like that don't vanish. They wait. To understand how Meghan allegedly crossed paths with Epstein's world, you have to rewind to a time when Epstein wasn't a warning sign. The year 2000. Back then, he wasn't a pariah. He was welcomed, invited. Sources say Prince Andrew personally brought Epstein into the royal box at Ascot, one of the most exclusive spaces in British society. Ghislaine Maxwell was there. Sarah Ferguson was there. And Epstein wasn't treated like an outsider. He was treated like someone already known. During that same period, Andrew and Epstein were seen together frequently, traveling, dining, attending private gatherings invisible to the public, and according to insiders, Fergie was always nearby. People familiar with those social circuits describe her as the bridge, the gatekeeper, the one who knew who mattered and who didn't. Introductions were power, invitations were currency, and Fergie understood both. So when later reports suggested Fergie had known Meghan long before Meghan ever met Harry, and Fergie publicly denied it, eyebrows quietly rose. Because if Meghan's path ever intersected with Maxwell, Epstein, or Andrew, Fergie would have known first, and according to claims, she did. Sources say Fergie recognized Meghan long before the fairy tale narrative began, knew exactly who she was, where she'd been, and exactly why she didn't want her anywhere near Prince Andrew. One insider described it bluntly. Fergie body blocked her, not physically, socially. She allegedly made sure Meghan never got close enough to Andrew to create a connection that could become dangerous. Because if Maxwell's alleged statements were true, the risk would have been obvious instantly. But here's the twist. While Fergie allegedly kept Meghan away from Andrew, she didn't keep her away from the royal world altogether. Meghan still moved through elite London spaces, private clubs, charity-linked events, places where wealthy benefactors and power brokers cross paths casually, which raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If Fergie truly knew Meghan before Harry, how far back does Meghan's royal-adjacent story actually go? Because if the timeline stretches earlier than the public version suggests, then Meghan's entry into the royal family didn't start with a blind date in 2016. It started years earlier, quietly, in the same elite social ecosystem that once welcomed Epstein and Maxwell without hesitation. Then came the weekend that changed everything. April 2015, Istanbul, the grand opening of a new Soho House location, not a random party, an invitation-only gathering designed to mix royalty, investors, celebrities, and political players. Prince Harry was there. Prince Charles was there. And according to people familiar with the guest list, Meghan was there too. Nothing in that world is accidental. Names are curated, guests are selected, connections are engineered. Soho House wasn't just a club, it was a networking machine. And after that Istanbul weekend, Meghan's trajectory shifted fast. Her image rebranded, her access expanded, her positioning sharpened. Months later, she was perfectly placed to meet Harry. As one insider put it, she didn't just meet him, she arrived at him. From there, the pattern continued. High-level New York gatherings, political rooms, media power circles, a 2014 appearance in Ukraine tied to Clinton-linked organizations, all before the royal spotlight. And then comes the detail that chills everything. Maxwell allegedly claimed she helped establish the Clinton Global Initiative using Epstein's money. If true, that means the same financial network ran beneath the humanitarian world Meghan entered just before meeting Harry. After Meghan entered royal life, she wasn't just polished, she was protected. Even when her career stalled, even when questions lingered, redactions weren't protecting her, insiders say. They were protecting the people who placed her. And that's where Prince William enters the story. Sources say William resisted Harry and Meghan's return long before the public rift, not out of emotion, out of fear of contamination. When Andrew attempted to attend Balmoral, William reportedly issued an ultimatum. Either Andrew goes or I do. Andrew left because William understood something simple and brutal. If Meghan was connected, even socially, to Epstein's network, letting her back into the royal fold risked reopening doors the monarchy had spent decades sealing shut. And now we reach the origin point whispered about in private rooms. A yacht floating offshore, long before fame, long before titles. A doorway, not an ending. From there, the path winds through private clubs, hidden gatherings, elite networks, and finally into the arms of a prince, unaware he was stepping into a story already in motion. And still, the missing 12 hours remained sealed. Names, dates, connections, locked away. Not hiding a scandal, hiding a network. And until those hours are released, this story isn't over. It's just paused, waiting. And what unsettles people the most isn't just what might be inside those sealed hours, it's the behavior that followed. Because silence like that doesn't happen unless powerful interests agree it must. According to insiders, after the Maxwell interviews were locked down, conversations inside legal and political circles shifted. Names stopped being spoken aloud. Certain questions were quietly discouraged. And one name in particular was treated like a live wire: Meghan Markle. People close to the situation say the mood wasn't outrage, it was containment, not "is this true?" But how do we make sure this never becomes public? Because if those allegations were ever explored openly, they wouldn't just touch Meghan. They would ripple outward straight into elite networks that overlap politics, philanthropy, finance, and royalty. And that's when protection becomes strategic, not personal. Sources describe a quiet understanding forming behind closed doors. Meghan's past wasn't to be interrogated, it was to be reframed. Suddenly, the narrative hardened. She was untouchable. Questioning her motives or trajectory became taboo in polite circles, and those who tried found themselves subtly shut out. Invitations dried up, media access cooled, friendly voices went silent. At the same time, people inside palace operations noticed something strange. Meghan was treated with a level of caution that didn't match her official status. Not warmth, not trust. Caution, as if certain senior figures sensed there was more beneath the surface but didn't have the freedom to confront it directly. According to whispers, this is where Prince William drew his line. Not publicly, quietly. He didn't need proof to recognize risk, he only needed patterns. The contrast between the brothers became impossible to ignore. Prince Harry was emotionally invested, fiercely protective, and unwilling to hear anything that challenged the narrative he believed. William, on the other hand, was looking at institutional survival. To him, the unanswered questions weren't gossip, they were liabilities. And then there's the detail insiders never say on camera. The fear wasn't just about what Meghan might have seen, it was about what she might know. Names, pathways, who introduced whom, who vouched, who funded, because in worlds like that, memory is currency and silence is leverage. People who've spent decades observing elite social ecosystems say this is how protection works. You don't erase someone, you elevate them. You wrap them in legitimacy so tightly that questioning them feels absurd. Humanitarian labels, royal titles, media alliances, it all creates a shield. And once that shield is in place, the past becomes radioactive. That's why the Maxwell testimony matters so much, because it threatens to undo the rebrand. It hints at a version of events that predates the palace, the speeches, the carefully staged image, a version rooted in access, not destiny, arrangement, not accident. And until those 12 missing hours are released, this story will continue to feel unfinished, like a sentence cut off mid-word, because the truth isn't gone, it's just waiting. And the longer it stays buried, the more people start asking why. People start asking why. People start asking why. People start asking